What's up, guys, and welcome to BitCast episode 108 for the week of December 11th, 2022. I'm your host, Jake Martin, and on the show this week, we have my two good friends, Mark and Landry. What's up, guys?
Hey, how's it going?
I need to stop introducing at the same time because it's so hard. There's always that pause. It's always like, oh, should I go first? Okay. But anyways, Landry, hey, good to see you, man.
You too, Jake. Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yes. Mark, good to see you. I like that sweater.
Thank you, Jake. Good to be here.
Well, if y'all are tuning in today, we'll be discussing the best games of 2022. A quick run through. We've chosen 3 games each that we played in 2022. The rules are that you had to have played it in 2022 and it has to have been new to that year. So it can be any new games that were released, but also anything that came out on NSO, PS Plus, or Xbox Game Pass in 2022, because that could have been the first time a lot of us had played those games. So it'd be a fun one for us to look back and just reminisce on 2022 on some of the games that we played. But housekeeping for you guys, be sure to check out polls on Spotify, review us there, and watch on Twitch every now and then. We have some live streams going up. I haven't done this in a while. I haven't live streamed in a while, but I've been jonesing. To get back. So here's to hoping. We're going to be skipping everyone's favorite segment this podcast because we're talking about games pretty much the entire time. So what you're playing will be coming back next podcast. But let's just go ahead and jump right into it, guys. The best games that we played of 2022, definitively. So even if you have played other games, these are actually the best games of 2022. There is no other debate. So,
True.
Mark, you're at the top of the list. And so we'll kind of go through our games in order. So, Mark, why don't you go first with your first game that you wanted to mention?
So I'm going to start at the top here. And I'll just say my game of the year is Tunic, which I played on the Xbox One because it came out in Game Pass first. Now it's out on PS5 and Switch and whichever. So you can all go and enjoy it. But it's an incredibly fresh take on the way you discover things in games. And so it plays a lot like a multiversal variant of Link to the Past, and it has a bit more like meta narrative in it. And it's fascinating of just the way it really relies on like kind of the shared language of video games. Mm-hmm. And so it's just a celebration of video games, I feel like, especially like old Zelda. It's very obviously ripping off that. And I love the in-game manual is kind of the main collectible, and that like really unlocks new abilities by kind of showing you how to do them. And it's like stuff you could have actually done the whole time, which is both aggravating and brilliant.
So I've heard a lot about this game. Landry, have you played Tunic?
No, but it is at the top of my list. Like, I am definitely going to play it. I still am kind of deciding between PS5 or Switch. It just feels so right on the Switch. But I kind of want to go for the trophies. I feel like this is a game I'm going to want to just complete entirely. I know it's difficult, but that really is appealing to me. But it's right up my alley. I can't believe I haven't played it yet, but it's definitely the next one on the list for me to tackle.
If I had to say anything about Tunic, it seems like a Landry-ass game. It really does.
It definitely is, man. It is crazy to me. It's taken so long for me to get my hands on it.
Yeah.
You're saying, Mark?
Yeah, it's definitely worth trying to complete it. I don't know if it's like 100% completion, but there is a true ending you can get to, and that last puzzle is just mind-blowing. It's so cool.
Sweet.
That's the one you said you were doing with your wife, was that?
Yes. Yeah. At the end, we like had a pen and paper, because Sarah was just beside me as we were trying to figure it out.
Man, you're the same guy who pre-show is like saying that old mechanics in games weren't that great, and you're willing to bust out pen and paper for a brand new game. Okay,
this is different.
Interesting dichotomy.
Different.
Yeah,
it feels novel when you don't really normally need it. One caveat I'll say is that the combat kind of sucks. It's very Souls-like, and I think that might have been a mistake. I probably because I just didn't have the patience for it, and it's just very difficult, kind of bouncy and just not very satisfying. So it's not very like fun to master. But there is an option. You can like toggle it at any point, having a no fail mode. And so you can just be invincible. And so it's worth trying first, but then if you like hit a boss and you can't get past it, just pop it on and go on past.
Nice.
Cool.
I like
so
that.
by Souls like, I'm sorry, go ahead, Jake.
I was just saying, I'm excited to check that one out. Go ahead, Landry, though.
Same. By Souls like, are you just like alluding to the difficulty, or is there actually like some mechanic that seems Souls like to you?
In kind of the like, there's a lot of pattern recognition that you can take on. Okay. When you die, you lose a bunch of loot, but you can go back and get the loot. That sort of thing, and just it being difficult.
Got you. Very cool.
I like difficulty. Death's Door is a game that I played last year and I loved, and it has some of the similar kind of vibe to it. But yeah. Tunic, I think from what I've seen, has a lot more of the clever puzzle solving and kind of discovery elements that Death's Door maybe didn't have as much of. So
yeah,
very much looking forward to it. Landry, what's your game on your list? Number one.
Okay, so the game of the year for me is God of War Ragnarok.
Hot dang.
Yeah, talked a little bit about this on Mark's podcast last week.
Yeah, check it out. 11.5 minutes. 11 and a half minutes talk about video games. Great podcast.
Thank you.
Awesome pod. It's just, when I fired it up, like within the first hour, I was just blown away by the AAA nature of the game. Like, it's just so much, it's on a completely different level than like any other game I've played in the past 2 years, really, since The Last of Us Part 2. Like, every line of dialogue is so finely tuned. The graphics are just like absolutely incredible to look at. And just everything feels so movie-esque in all of the scenes. And then, you know, actually getting a hold of the gameplay, the action in that game, the combat is probably my favorite action combat in any kind of action game at all. And I mean, like, I'm a fan of the Bayonetta games. I love like the old Devil May Cry stuff, but
yeah,
that stuff is so skill based, and I'm not actually that good at those games. I just kind of like that flashy action. And I love like the Spider-Man games on PS4, but that is more like there's a lot of dexterity and like acrobatics to the combat in that. And I just love the brute force and like WWE, like I'm gonna like rip someone's head off kind of nature of God of War. And it's just like so intense and so action packed, and it knows what it is. But it is a game that, you know, it's funny, but it can take itself seriously as well. It does it in the right ways. It kind of reminds me of like tonally, like a good Marvel movie. It's definitely a piece of entertainment. But it, you know, it's got some good merit to kind of like mull over, and some interesting themes as well. So, it's really hitting just about every great note that a good video game can for me so far. And I have not finished it yet. I'm still probably 15 hours in at this point, maybe.
Yeah.
Nice.
Well, I'll go ahead and just talk about God of War because it was third on my list, or game number 3 for me. So I'll go ahead and throw it on here. But yeah, I've really enjoyed my time with God of War Ragnarok as well. To everything that Landry has said, I think the combat really is what makes these new entries probably the standouts in terms of like modern action role playing games. Just the way that they synchronize with different weapons that you kind of attain throughout the story, and how you can kind of bounce between them, and also the upgrades that you choose are really meaningful. They actually do have a huge impact in your damage output, and like they scale differently. And one thing that I like that they've added this time around that I really feel like incentivizes you to try different combat mechanics is there's a leveling up of like specific moves. So if you use like, there's one where you hold down R1 and you'll throw like a shockwave of ice at enemies. And it's a great move because it hits them like multiple times. But if you use that, I don't know how many times, Landry, but you get to like, I think gold rank with that move. And then it allows you to attach like another modifier to that one specifically. So it's like, oh, this one does more frost damage. This one does more knockback or something like that. And so you can kind of, I don't know, it rewards you for trying out different moves rather than just spamming the same one over and over and over again.
I love that system. It's so intuitive because it is like I just said, I'm into those platinum games, but I'm so bad at just falling into one or two moves and just kind of spamming that for the whole game. But this really like gets you out of your element, out of your comfort zone, and gets you trying different things. And then by the end of the game, or, you know, just 10, 15 hours in, you're putting together all these really cool, flashy combos, and it looks cool and it feels good when you're pulling it off. And, closing those rings and getting those extra little modifiers is pretty cool too. So
yeah, all around great game. All right, well, I'll jump to my game of the year. My game of the year was Elden Ring. I mentioned this on Mark's podcast. You guys should definitely check it out and go like and subscribe. On whatever podcast service you listen on. But yeah, Elden Ring. I've said enough about this game, and Landry, I feel like you've said enough about this game. I'm sorry.
No, you're right.
But what I will say that probably needs to be reiterated again is that, Elden Ring, like Breath of the Wild, is a game that took over the world for a while. And it's even more surprisingly so with Elden Ring because it is such a hard game. It is a Soulsborne style game. I had friends that had no business playing these kinds of games. One of my closest friends from Ohio was like, "Hey man, have you heard of this game called Elden Ring?" And I was like, "Yes." I was like, "I think I want to pick it up and play it." And I was like, "Okay, yeah. I mean, it's awesome." But knowing like his game style, like he's mainly like he plays like NHL. He'll play like NBA 2K, and then he'll play. He plays Fall Guys. Those are like the 3 games that he plays. And I'm just like, man, this is a big jump for you to play Elden Ring. But it was like that big of a phenomenon that people were like, everyone likes this game. I guess I should check it out. And yeah, I really feel like it deserved that. It really was just such a beast of a game that executed on a vibrant and like kind of just crazy open world. Like where Breath of the Wild executed on like climbability and exploration, this is just like, oh, this is an open world Soulsborne on a different level that no one expected to see. It really was just so impressive. So that's all I'll say.
Jake, I had the exact same experience with a friend who has basically only played Breath of the Wild, and growing up, he was like a huge film buff friend that I would go to, and I knew that he was really into Lord of the Rings, and we would always talk about that. But he played Breath of the Wild because he saw his kids playing it. He was like, "This is amazing." And then the next game he played was Elden Ring, and that is the thing jump. I think that didn't. It kind of makes sense, I guess, but that's what I didn't expect. And I don't know if it was the George R.R. Martin like marketing power that brought in a lot of people, but I do think that Miyazaki's worlds are so captivating, and he tells stories in video games through his world so well that, I mean, even just seeing a commercial for that video game, you're like, wow, that is so impressive. And you would never say that this is like the most impressive graphically, but the art style is just like, it hits you. It's like something you haven't really seen before. It's just this like haunting fantasy world. And it had the power to draw a lot of people in. I think that's very impressive.
Yeah.
I did not play Elden Ring, but just as a passive consumer, it was, looking back now, I'm fine with it. But for like the 2 months when Elden Ring was just everything and it was inescapable, I was kind of a little tired of it. But there was just a lot of like great memes and content that came out of it, and really just comes from all the different weird corners of the game. Like just thinking of videos where people would get just pummeled by rolling spikes over and over again, and just comedy that way, or the guy that was like let me solo her, who just shows up in random games and on only underwear.
So he became a legend.
So it's just fun to have every so often a game like that just does take over just the zeitgeist, and just you have ripples and ripples of content, and it's fun to see.
I think the last game like that, honestly, was Animal Crossing. Like it had to have been Animal Crossing, that took over on that level. So cool
I
stuff.
look forward to like a year or two, and I just eat all of the crow, and this becomes like my favorite game of the past decade, because I am like 100% sure that will happen. There's just sometimes, like for me, it's a tone thing. I'll pick up a game and I'm just not in the mood for it. That's what it was with Elden Ring. Like, it just was not vibing for me, and I don't know why. I felt like I had to push through because everyone was talking about it, and it just didn't hit for me at the moment. So I'll be in the mood for it in like a year, and I'll be like, man, I am such an idiot.
I think I know what'll get you in. We'll play some co-op, and we'll explore some of the lands between together, and I'll get you to some spots that. So one of your complaints, I think you said on Mark's podcast, you're like, it just doesn't have the intricacy of Bloodborne. And I was like, oh, just wait, Landry. There are some sections that'll blow your mind.
No question. Yeah, I'm sure that's there.
All right, Mark, what's game number 2 for you this year?
Yeah. So this was one I did not expect to be so high, but now looking back, of course, is Marvel Snap, being the mobile game. I say I did not expect it because I am not into card games at all. Like that does not sound like my thing. I am very into Marvel, but I kind of like always when this was announced, I was like, it's another Marvel mobile game that I'll just ignore.
Yeah.
But then people started praising it, and it's just like people kept talking about how good it was. And it's free. You download it, and I tried it out, and it's so accessible. Is really like its greatest strength. Like it's onboarding, and the tutorial is really good. And even kind of like even now, I've been playing for about a month or more, and it's still kind of easing me into more and more complicated stuff. Like the overall meta is getting more and more complicated over time, and but it's not like just doesn't throw you to the deep end. It's really nice. And with the accessibility, the matches are super short, and the decks are small. So I know that's a kind of having conversations about card games like that is something that's really unique about Marvel Snap is that how there's only 12 cards per deck, and the matches are like 5 minutes.
That's a very small deck of cards.
Yeah. And so it's like you're not spending a whole lot of time in the menu kind of piecing over it. You can spend that time if you want to, but like you don't really have to think too deeply. And there's also, for the Marvel side of it, is a ton of fun because there's a ton of references. It's also posed a lot more from the comics and the movies. And so there's just a lot of deep cuts that are really fun. And so each character card has its own unique power. Each location has its own kind of rule set, and it's all a reference to something. It's really cool. I think the most fun part of it for me is like trying to anticipate your opponent, and using whatever strategy you have for your certain deck and trying to outmaneuver your opponent and trying to recognize their strategy. And it feels great when you can just like guess correctly and you outmaneuver them. So it's a ton of fun.
I think when you get to the point of like basically guessing what your opponent is going to do, like you're talking about, you're in the competitive field at that point, Mark. I want you to know that you're starting to enter into the competitive level of card battling, which is a great thing. It's a great thing.
Man, I'll say this. I'm not a card battle gamer. I've never played one of those games before until Marvel Snap. But like, I think what's so impressive about it is that you start doing that really early on. I feel like, I've probably played maybe 6 or 7 hours total. And I find myself doing the same thing, like trying to predict what other people are doing. And so far, what's like crazy to me, I'm like, how am I still winning almost everything at this point? Like, I feel like I'm really good at the game, but I know that I can't be because I'm just like, I was terrible at the only other card game I tried to play was Slay the Spire.
Yeah.
And my brother was really good at that. And I was like, I finally beat the first boss. And he was like, oh man, he's like, it took you that long to beat the first boss. And it's like, I thought it was actually the whole game. So it was kind of an embarrassing moment, but Marvel Snap, I feel like I'm good at it. And I'm not a huge Marvel fan at all, but I used to read comics as a kid, and it is like scratching that nostalgia itch there. It's so cool to see all the cards art and like the variants that you'll get as well. It's just really cool.
Yeah. I have not played it, and I think out of I think just trying to balance everything else that I can even try to finish this year. Like I haven't finished God of War Ragnarok. I'm playing Pokemon Scarlet. I have like Final Fantasy VII remake on the back burner. I have like so many things I know I want to do, but I just downloaded freaking Vampire Survivors, which is like a huge indie hit as well. Nice. And that game's super fun. And Hannah's like, you've been on your phone like more than I've seen you on your phone in a very long time. And I was like, it's Vampire Survivors. So I know like Marvel Snap will be just as addicting or dangerous for me.
Yes. I feel like Marvel Snap hit the right time because we are potentially a day away from a newborn. And so I'll have a lot of time just like
you have one hand free kind of. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yep.
So it's good timing.
Perfect. Well, maybe if that does happen, I'll download Marvel Snap so I can get destroyed by you guys. It'll be a great time. All right, Landry, number 2, what's on your list?
Number 2 for me is a game that just has flown so under the radar. and that's Horizon Forbidden West.
Mm.
This series has had such an interesting release window, because the first one was released right a week before Breath of the Wild, so it just completely dominated the conversation. And this game, I think, was released the week before Elden Ring, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
And Elden Ring just completely like snuffed out every kind of conversation that was going on about Horizon Forbidden West. But the big difference is that Horizon Forbidden West is a great game and Horizon Zero Dawn sucked. So it's like so much better of a video game than Horizon Zero Dawn was. And really what it is like the world of Horizon is weird to me. It's like this kind of future where everybody lives in like all these like kind of villages, and they all are out in the wilderness, and yet everyone is like really clean and has great skin, and all of their outfits are like just made from like all kinds of weird materials, and nothing like matches on any kind of color wheel. And it's like it's just a weird hodgepodge of like kind of design, I guess, like elements and art style. It doesn't really make sense to me on that level, but the world they built is so fun to explore. And the traversal systems they implemented in this game are they feel fresh and new. They don't feel like they're ripping off of like Breath of the Wild. What it kind of feels like to me is like an Uncharted traversal system, but in an open world scenario. But then you have like the sail from Breath of the Wild that you can just kind of like jump off any cliff and fly. But it's in this like PS5 graphic world where there's like no
so
pop in and anything you see you can go to. It is one of those games, open world games, that falls into the trap of like follow the yellow marker to your next destination. So you kind of have blinders on in that regard. But as far as those games go, like the Ubisoft design is kind of what I think of. As far as those games go, this is just so much fun. And I think a lot of it is in the combat system, like trying to figure out how to take down a dinosaur and like looking for its weak parts. Like every fight feels like a boss fight, basically. And Mark, that's probably your nightmare. But it's just so cool.
I was into it till that point.
Yeah, it's just, well, they're not like HP sponges. I think I've heard you use that term before. It's more or less a puzzle of trying to figure out how to defeat each enemy. And that's what I got really hooked on. And there are so many downsides to the game, but all of the great things like rise up above it. And it's a shame to me that it just kind of flew under the radar towards the end of the year.
Yeah, it is certainly up there with one of the most I would say like the most polished or impressive looking PS5 games that came out this year. Even when you mentioned pop-in, I've noticed some pop-in in God of War Ragnarok, actually. Just it periodically, just it's like very, very far background elements, but I've like there's like I was in a forest and I noticed some pop-in, like some trees that were filling in. I was like, oh, that's kind of funny. But yeah, I mean, Horizon, to be able to achieve that graphical like fidelity and look that good, it's wild. It's wild.
Yeah.
And it is, I would say that the battle is kind of, Landry, would you agree? It's kind of like Zelda fights or Zelda bosses in a way where there are like weak points on enemies and you have to use a particular weapon to dislodge that weak point to then like do more damage to it and knock it down and go up and hit it if you want to and hurt it more. So there's a bit more of that like dance you're doing as opposed to just hitting it over and over and over again.
Yeah, that's absolutely it. I'm terrible at the combat. Like I had to put it on easy mode. I just couldn't figure it out.
It's hard.
But yeah, I think that's another like strength of the game is how intricate it is. But once you put it on easy mode, you feel like super powerful. So that's really fun too.
I am amazing. All right. My number 2 is Inscryption. I talked about this also on Mark's podcast. This was not my game of the year, but very close to it. I was so excited when this came to Switch because before this, it had only been on PC and I just heard amazing things said about it. So when it did come to Switch, I was like fully in and just started playing this game. And again, this game really rests on what it does story-wise. So it's hard to talk about it without really spoiling too much. But what it does is so unlike anything I've ever played before. And I would recommend it to anybody because it really is like maybe a 10 to 15 hour experience. It's not super long, probably about closer to 10 hours. And it's a card battler. So if you like card battlers, Mark, I would say definitely go for it. And it's not so obtuse that it's hard to get a hang of. But again, it just does very smart things with the story. And it's just so much more than a card battler, I think, at the end of it. So definitely check it out. A game that I will always hold fond memories of, because I don't normally like spooky games. And it's one of the more spooky games that I played this year. But it uses the spooks in a good way.
Nice. Yeah, it's definitely something that I kept hearing about a lot. Really want to check into it. I'm not at all a fan of spooky things, but I feel like eventually this will be something that I'll want to dig into. And it's the more I hear about it, like the less I know about it. I feel like, because everyone kind of stops short of like it's a card battler, but then they just kind of trail off. So the curiosity will get me eventually.
Get there.
Those are my thoughts exactly, Mark. I well, except for that, I actually really love the horror genre. I hate like really super bloody things, but I really like a lot of good horror stuff. So I think this game would probably hit with me. I'm not a big deck builder guy, but I can make amends if the story's good and they're doing something interesting with the genre. So I think I'd probably be right up my alley.
Good. That's the purpose of this podcast. All right, now moving on to game 3. We have a little bit of time left. Mark, What is your number 3 for us?
Okay, so this one's a little weird because it probably shouldn't be here, but it's Mario Strikers Battle League. It's a game that's very, very near and dear to my heart. And it's
Billy's in a corner of the internet yelling somewhere.
Yeah, somewhere Billy has sensed a disturbance in the force. And so I want to shout it out because it won't be on anyone's game of the year list, and it doesn't really deserve to be. But it was definitely my most hyped game of the year, and something that was like on my wish list for a very long time for a new Mario Strikers. And it was exactly what I wanted, but then nothing more than that. And like the core gameplay is great, but that's kind of all there is to it. And they added so much emphasis on the online play. But there was like none of the incentives to play online. There kind of is, but there's just not much to it. And there's just a few really baffling decisions of like, you can't play 8 players online, or at least like not 8 switches. You can play 2 people per 4 switches, which doesn't happen. And it does the whole like the Switch area Mario Sports thing where it launches just bare bones and kind of adds in stuff over time. It's all free, but just like kind of wish this was there to begin with.
That's like the most frustrating strategy, man.
Yeah,
I've bought every single one of those games except for Strikers, and I never fire it up whenever the new content comes out because I'm like, I've already passed it,
Yeah,
and it sits on my shelf, and I just never really get into the new stuff.
Yeah. But also, like, I imagine this is a great game if you're on a dorm hall, and like having the couch co-op part of it is a ton of fun. Like I've played with some neighbors here, and it just we've kind of they're younger kids, and it's been a ton of fun. And it's objectively like a 6 out of 10 game that could have been 8 out of 10, even though for me it's kind of like an 8 out of 10 that could have been a 10 out of 10. And I do genuinely think I think it has like the best vertical slice gameplay of any Mario sports game, like not including Mario Kart, but it's just not the best like full package game. Like it's a great game. There's just not enough of it in any direction.
Well, you're talking to a guy who can play like exhibition matches of NFL Blitz on the Nintendo 64 30 years later and still have like an incredible time. So I feel like this would be right up my alley.
When you mentioned about like the sports games, I feel like that's been the case for a lot of the sports games on Switch. A lot of the Mario sports games, they kind of come out, they feel kind of flat. There's always, you feel like there could be more that they could have done with every single one of those titles. You're like, man, this was just not totally there. Like Mario Tennis Aces was like so close. They had a story mode, but it wasn't really the kind of story mode you wanted. You're like, okay, that was fine. Same with Mario Golf. You're like, this was fine. So
and
it's just too bad.
One final shout out for Strikers too is like it's really pretty, and like there's so much care put into animations and everything. Like it's so full of life, especially compared to like Mario Golf. Kind of felt very like rubber chickeny. And yeah, they're just like, I just regret that there's not more to it.
Mario Strikers. But hey, it got a shout out on this podcast for
Yes,
the
it
best
did.
games of 2022, and that's all that matters. All right, and Landry, closing us out, since we already talked about my third game, what is yours?
Mine is I thought about just saying like Nintendo Switch expansion pack because it got a lot of hate, but I loved everything about it this year. But I'm gonna say instead Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge.
Yeah, nice.
I had just a couple of really cool nights with this game. I think we the three of us played through maybe the entire thing.
The entire game.
Yeah, that was an awesome night. And then I played through the whole thing again with a couple other buddies from high school like a week later, and I hadn't talked to them in a long time, so it was cool catching up with those guys. And I probably haven't played it since then. You know, I got my fill on just those two playthroughs, but I think just going through a new like arcade style game, brawling with some friends online, which I've never done that before, like played online through a brawler, and it worked really well. Like there were some moments where there were some like, some glitches, and then characters just like popped out for a level. But for the most part, the experience worked really well. And I thought it was fun. The love and care of just the sprite work and every single thing that was calling back to the shows, which I'm by no means a huge fan of the Ninja Turtles. You know, when I was a kid, I absolutely was, but I haven't watched any of that stuff in like 30 years. So it was enough for me to know it was a reference. I couldn't really put it in its place, but you could just tell that every single frame had detail in it that was calling back to something in the show. And it was just really fun to go through. It was almost like playing through a museum, but also a pretty good brawler as well, and a good time. So
put that on the back of the box there. It's like a museum, but also a pretty good brawler. I too had a great time with that, and I'll tell you, I tried to. So after I played that with you guys, I was like, I'm kind of in a brawler kick right now. I want to play something else, and I think one of y'all had mentioned Scott Pilgrim, so I picked that up to try and just kind of move through it. And I'll tell you, it just didn't feel as good. I think the combat is just a little more stiff in that game. I didn't feel like I could move around and do as much as I was in Shredder's Revenge. So yeah, shout out to TMNT Shredder's Revenge. That game actually was a ton of fun, and the folks that made it did an excellent job of just really paying attention to details and combat and movement. So
yeah, I know for me, I grew up, and my friends at the local Chuck E. Cheese in Charlotte, North Carolina, there at Carmel Commons, we had Turtles in Time. And I love that this kind of like resurrected that feeling of powering through just a beat 'em up and just mashing buttons. And it's like nice. It's even way more complicated than Turtles in Time. Like there's way much more to chew on in Shredder's Revenge. And so it was just nice to kind of see that be resurrected.
I agree.
Agreed.
I agree. Well, guys, that was a great list. In order, going from the top, we have Tunic, Marvel Snap, Mario Strikers. Landry, you had God of War, and then you had Horizon Forbidden West.
Yep.
I get those two mixed up. Shredder's Revenge, and I had Elden Ring, Inscryption, and God of War Ragnarok. So right there, 8 incredible games in 2022. So closing this out now, overall ranking for 2022. Landry, well, actually, I'll go first so I can give you some time, because I didn't see your notes put in here, so I'm gonna give you some time to think about it.
Sure.
I would say I give this year a C as a whole, because there was a lot of stuff that was supposed to come out this year that didn't, and it felt kind of flat. I mean, really, from a Nintendo and Xbox standpoint, things were pretty weak. And PlayStation 5 was great. We had a lot of like pretty solid titles released. So if it was just the games that I played, I would say it was a very solid year, like B. But holistically, I gave it a C. Mark, how about you?
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I'd give it a C. I didn't really miss it though. I think I had a lot of like plenty of older stuff to play, and
Yeah.
I even went into like a whole replay all the 3D Zeldas kick, and that's what I'm into right now. And so not a whole lot came out, but I didn't really miss it that much.
Nice. Landry.
Yeah, I think I'm going to give it a C as well. I mean, I'm a huge Nintendo fan. Like that's where my heart is. And Nintendo had a pretty crappy year, in my opinion. Like they had one of the worst years, I think, in the Switch cycle, just as far as game content coming out. Like,
yeah,
I didn't really play anything except for Kirby's. I can't even remember the name of the Forgotten Land. Yeah, and that was a good game.
Yeah, it was
but
great.
it was by no means like a game of the year contender for me.
Yeah.
So, and everything else is just kind of iterative, like Splatoon 3, Bayonetta 3. So I would give them like a D. But PlayStation really, I mean, man, they brought a lot of awesome stuff with Elden Ring. Even though it didn't hit for me, I recognize, a lot of its greatness. God of War, Ragnarok, and then PlayStation Plus Extra or whatever their confusing subscription model is it's provided me with a lot of joy and entertainment this year. Being a first-time PS5 owner. So you mentioned Final Fantasy VII Remake. That game is really awesome.
It's so good.
That would have made my list but I was trying to operate under the confines of 2022. But yeah, it's been a fun year. I, like you guys, have just kind of wormed my way into like playing old stuff, and I've just been on an NES kick for a very long time. So
I was about to say, I think you've played the most NES games of anyone in 2022.
Yeah, maybe in the whole entire world. So it's been quite a feat. So it's been fun.
All right, well, I'll see if I can close this out here in like 30 seconds. Unfortunately, y'all, that is the end of our podcast. Listeners, remember, you can go to BitCast at bitbloggers.com to write into us. What were your favorite games of 2022? We want to know. Landry, Mark, thank you so much for being on the podcast. You two are absolute dons. I appreciate you both.
Thanks, dude.
Follow us on Twitch, Discord, all the social channels. And until next time, y'all, this has been BitCast. Thanks for tuning in to talk about some stuff.